Again, for everyone who's just joining us for this event, we're really lucky and privileged to have Ian and Jose from the Pride and Parent Circle of TTC North America, and they're going to lead a panel on coming out as a family conversation, and I will let Jose take it away.
What's up, Dad? I was wondering if you had a minute to talk. The fuck do you want, bro? Daddy, I just wanted to talk to you. You know, growing up, I didn't know if I didn't know if you wanted me or not. What kind of question is that, bro? Dad, it's an honest question. Did you even love me? Why are you asking me this? Bro, I was trying to make you into a man, okay? And look, I didn't succeed. What kind of man asks another man if he loves him? Dad, you're not just a man to me. You're my father. A father's supposed to tell his son that he loves him. He's supposed to show him that he cares. So I didn't care for you? Is that what you think? I didn't have to tell you that I loved you. I did it every day by going to work, by bringing home food so you can eat, giving you money for school. That's how you know I cared for you. So we're just supposed to know, Dad? What about connecting with one another, Pop? You know, I used to go to school and all my friends used to have all these amazing stories about their father and things that they would do with their father. Where were you for me, Dad? I was right here. What are you talking about? I never left you. Dad, you're not listening to me. Yes, you were here, Dad. But you weren't here, Poppy. I wanted to come home from school and tell you about my day. I wanted to learn how to DJ like you, Dad. I wanted to lift weights like you, but you weren't here for me. What did you want me to do? I couldn't take you out. Every time we walked outside, people would look at you. Like that time you asked me for that doll. Dad, it was a toy for boys and I wanted it. It was a doll. And boys don't play with dolls, all right? That I didn't want this conversation to start this way. You know what? I'm just gonna say it, Pop. I'm a man. I'm a man that's attracted to other men. So you're a faggot. Is that what you're telling me? You telling me my son's a faggot? No, I didn't say that, Dad. And don't let you ever say that word to me again, all right? Don't you disrespect me in my own house. You hear me? This is still my house. You do what I tell you to do, no, Pop. You don't tell me what to do anymore, right? You left me out there to figure this out all by myself, and guess what? I did. You know what? Get out of my face. I don't want to see you no more. I don't want to hear from you no more, all right? Don't come back here for the holidays. Don't come back here for anything. And when your dumb ass goes out there and catches a disease, don't you come running back to me. Pop, what do you want me to do? You know what, Dad? You're going to be a lonely old man, and you're going to have nobody but to thank but yourself. I'm sorry. I was never the son that you wanted, but you were never the father that I needed. Thank you all for joining us for Coming Out a Family Conversation. Give me a second to bring myself back. That was a monologue that I wrote some time ago on a one-man show that I toured with about my own coming out experience to my Puerto Rican parents living in New York. But first thing I want to say, this is a safe space for us to have an honest and real conversation. Please feel free to ask any questions, either through chat or raise your hand. We'll have a Q&A section towards the end of the workshop altogether. But I want to make sure that we are having an honest conversation. As long as we're respectful, it's okay to ask specific questions. It's okay to ask certain things. This is literally a workshop to support anyone who's dealing with the hardship of coming out, which is not easy for the person coming out and not easy for anyone connected. I want to take the time to, again, thank Scott Clinton and Ian Kynor, who's also been helping me put this workshop together. So huge shout out to them both. But without further ado, I want to introduce some guest speakers. We have Sarah Furley from FFLAG, who, if you guys don't know about FFLAG, FFLAG is an organization and registered charity who supports family and parents and families and their LGBT plus members. And then also Jessica Renteria. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I saw the name and my Spanish accent wants to come out almost immediately. So I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Jessica is a member of the Parents ID Circle here in the Americas. So thank you both for joining us today and having this conversation. I want to just kick us off with just some introductions about your personal stories and life experiences and where you come from. So Sarah, do you mind just kicking us off?
Okay, thank you. And well, that was so powerful, Jose, that it's quite difficult to follow it. I'm glad we had a minute there to just take that in. I mean, I don't know if saying I enjoyed watching it was the right words, but that was so powerful. Thank you. So yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm in England. I live in the southwest of England, down in Cornwall, which is sort of quite a rural, sort of remote part of the UK. And I'm married, and my husband and I, we're a blended family, and we have 3 children between us, as we thought when we came together, 3 boys. And yeah, I don't know if you want me to carry on right now, Jose, and describe the sort of, yeah.
No, please, yeah, take it, yes.
Yeah, so we're a blended family now, but I spent quite a few years as a single parent with my child, and I will be calling them my child. They're 26, and I will be referring to them with they and them pronouns, and that will become clear why as we go along. But yeah, so many years we were on our own together. It was sort of me and them against the rest of the world. We were very close, and they seemed happy. And when my husband and I came together as a family, that seemed to go fine. The kids got on okay. Everything was good, or so I thought. And Nuts, I'll call them Nuts. It's a nickname. It gives them some anonymity. They went off to university at 18, and they went up to London. And everything seemed good. I visited them a couple of times around their birthday, and I mean, they were a little bit solitary maybe, but that was kind of normal for them, so I wasn't too worried. But when they came home after the first term, around Christmas, something was wrong, and they didn't want to talk about it. And that was unusual. And being a sort of worrying mom, it was difficult for me when they went away. So I wanted to know, I wanted to find out what was wrong. I wanted to fix it. But I realized that I needed to step back and eventually sort of just create a calm space where maybe they would share with me what was going on for them. But that didn't happen. And they, you know, the day before they were supposed to go back to university, I said, well, you know, it's a 5-hour drive for us. You know, you haven't booked a train. You're expecting me to take you back? And they said, no, I'm not going back. And I didn't know why, but I knew something was wrong and I didn't know what it was. And there followed what seemed like a really long period of time, but I know it can only have been about 6 weeks, because it was February when they broke the news to me. And I know that because the 2 boys had gone to stay with their mum. My husband was away with family. And so during that 6 weeks, Nuts had been really quiet, a lot of time in their bedroom, not really getting on with life, not deciding on what to do next. I know that was sort of early days, but not even wanting to engage and sort of talk about, okay, university didn't work out for me. What might we think about doing next? They were very, very withdrawn. And then one night, when all the rest of the family were away, they came into my bedroom very late at night. I'd already gone to bed, and they said, Mum, I think I should explain to you what's going on for me. And I remember feeling quite nervous, but just thought, telling myself, just be quiet and listen, don't jump in with loads of questions, just listen. And they sat on the edge of my bed and they held my hand. And they did this so beautifully. They explained hesitantly. It was difficult for them and it took a while, but they explained that over a period of a number of years, they had been coming to terms with the knowledge that they were transgender. And in that moment, my world kind of fell apart. Sorry, when I talk about it, I'm right back there. I should say it's absolutely fine. But in that moment, I understood what that word meant, but I couldn't really comprehend what this would mean for us as a family. And they asked me if I had any questions, and I think I managed to say, okay, well, not right now, but I probably will have some questions, but not right now. But in my head, it was just a sort of screaming, this is not happening. Not because I necessarily wanted to prevent it, but I couldn't take it in. And after the initial shock, I was really, really scared for them and what their life would be, which I now imagine to be very difficult, very challenging, dangerous even. But also, if I'm honest, and I'm not proud of this, but scared, how am I going to tell the rest of the family? As it turns out, very badly. And we can talk about that. I was concerned for myself as well. And then also think, terrible guilt. I love my child so much. And yet they had been struggling with this for a number of years, and I had absolutely no idea. And in that time, they'd done all the things they were supposed to do. They passed their exams, they passed their driving test, they'd had a few girlfriends, including the girlfriend they have now, their beautiful girlfriend. They'd been together for 8 years. All these sort of normal markers and achievements they'd done, and all the time they'd been struggling with this in secret, and I hadn't helped them. And we've talked about this afterwards a lot, Nuts and I. One thing I said to them, I was so shocked when you came out, but I think I managed to, cover it up. They're like, Mom, you so didn't. Yeah, okay, that's fair. And yeah, I needed a lot of support. And I didn't want to burden my child with giving that. So it was fortunate for me that I found the local group of FFLAG, which, as Jose described at the beginning, is a charity which just offers peer support to parents whose children come out as LGBT or just questioning their gender identity. And that was the start of the path for me to better understanding. And also then feeling, why didn't I know this before? Why couldn't we have had these conversations before? And that's what motivated me to then volunteer for FFLAG and carry on. And we can talk about that later, but that is the start of my journey, a position which I now say has totally switched I see this as such a positive thing in my life, but when I go back to those early days, it was a huge shock.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for allowing yourself to just be vulnerable with us with that story. Before we get into, you know, all of that, let me just go ahead and take the time to introduce Jessica. Jessica, would you mind coming up and introducing yourself and talking to us a little bit about your experience?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm with the Idea Parent Group, and I also work in the Service Desk Department in Canada, but I'm based in the US. So my story would be, it's my brother. Growing up, we were super, super close, and I think that's how my parents wanted it, like just me, my brother, and my sister. And as growing up, I always noticed, I noticed, you know, he would mess around and like wear my mom's heels and things like that. And, you know, and we would just see it like as a joke, or every time we would play, like he would always pick the female character, or when we would play video games, he would always lean towards the female character. And so after a while, like when I was in high school, I would always notice, you know, he doesn't have girlfriend. Like I've never seen him bring a girl or anything like that. But I didn't really ask her anything. And then as you know, once I was a senior in high school, he's 4 years older than me. We were just hanging out in the house, and then I hear him on the phone, and that was his boyfriend at the time. And I would hear him, you know, say what normally in relationships you say to each other, nice things, you compliment each other. So I just got put off guard a little bit, and I was just like, wait, I thought he was talking to a guy. And so I guess his boyfriend was encouraging him to come out to a family member. And so because me and him are so close, he hung up the phone and he wanted to talk to me. And he looked at me and he says, I'm gay. And I wasn't surprised. At the back of my mind, I knew that he was. And I don't know if he was just scared to come out to the family or anything. And I was happy for him. I told him, I kind of figured that you were, and I'm happy that you chose to come out to me as the first family member. And I was, like I said, happy for him, but at the same time I was sad. And not because he was gay, but it wasn't that long ago with the Matthew Shepard story, and you hear all these like terrible stories about, you know, anyone who's gay comes out and how brutally that poor man got killed. And I was scared. I was scared for my brother, because now it's coming to be more acceptable, but it was late 90s, early 2000s when he came out. So I was scared, and I didn't tell anybody. And the one person who I did confide in was actually a manager at my work, where I worked at a restaurant. And she is a proud lesbian, and she consoled me and she said, your brother's going to be okay. And so just hearing that from other LGBT member communities, and just hearing that as long as he has your support and your family support, he's going to be okay. And I encouraged him to come out to everyone else in the family, my parents, my sister, and my parents were so supportive. My dad knew all along. He said, I knew you were going to be different. And just seeing that bond with our family and how we were so supportive of him, and encouraged him to be more what he wants to be, what he's missed out on in high school and years prior, because he was in his early 20s. So he did miss out quite a few of experiencing in high school. And Jose, it breaks my heart to hear your story and how your dad reacted the way you came out to him, because I also have other gay friends who families have abandoned them and disowned them. And I'm so grateful for my parents that they were so understanding and so encouraging of him, that it breaks my heart to hear that not all parents are like that. And being a mom myself, like, my kids are everything to me. So for me to hear how you can abandon your child because of who he wants to be or who they want to be is just so heartbreaking. And I teach my son every day to be kind and courteous to everybody, and not to be shameful, not to put bad things on other family members, but my brother is my son's favorite uncle, and he knows that he's gay, and he just sees it as a normal human being.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing that. I will tell you that gay uncles and what we call them in my family are gunkles. We are awesome. So of course your brother is the favorite. I understand that. I understand that because I am my favorite with my nieces and nephews. And just to, again, I just want to reiterate, this is a safe space. So, you know, as we have these conversations, there are some things that are going to be said, and, you know, I want people to be able to speak freely and to speak, you know, how they feel comfortable with speaking. And, you know, if there's any specific question, please feel free to ask. Part of the reason why we decided to have this conversation is because, as you guys, well, Jessica, you just articulated, you know, my coming out story, right? And that's just a piece of the story, right? It goes a lot further now. I've been out for almost 20 years now, but you know, it took me a long time to finally get to a point where I can look back and think how difficult this was for my parents as well, right? And understanding that. I think, you know, when you first come out, it's so traumatizing, you know, having to figure out who you are. You know, it's not that I want to become, right? This is who I am. This is who I am. This is I am this way. And now I'm trying to figure out this process while still trying to identify myself in this world of just stereotypes, whether it's in my family, in my culture, in the city that I live, right? Um, so I think it's taken me a long time to really think about the other side of this and how difficult it is for a parent or a sibling or a grandparent to be able to look at something that they thought was one way and now it's not, right? So what I want to ask both of you, and Jessica, we'll start with you since we started with Sarah first. You talked a little bit about you know, how sad it made you when your brother came out to you, right? And you talked a little bit about the unfortunate death of Matthew Shepard. And for those of you who don't know, Matthew Shepard was a young teen who unfortunately was brutally murdered due to a hate crime in his local town, right? He was brutally, in my opinion, brutally murdered was also, it's an understatement what happened to him, unfortunately. But talk to us a little bit about that. And if you can also talk about how your parents may have reacted to his coming out. Like what was it about his coming out that made you guys really get fearful or scared about that, of him being true to himself?
For me, it was just the people who I surrounded myself with, and they would use, you know, the F word a lot, and how they would, and in high school you just hear about it, and that is what made me sad. Was I don't want someone to call my brother that. I don't want my brother to go through that experience. Like, how is he going to feel if someone said that word to him? How is he going to feel if someone's going to come? Like, I was just being protective of him. And even though he was older than me, like, I was just being that protective, quote unquote, mother, you know, thinking, oh my goodness, like, what if he goes out late and we don't hear from him? What if something happened? What if a hate crime was? So all these things were coming to my head, and that's why I was so scared. And what if he was, I feel like, oh, he's finally free. He can be who he wants to be, but I just felt the world wasn't ready for him to be the way that be the person that he wants to be. And that's what scared me. I didn't want to hear like my mom getting a phone call saying that he was part of a hate crime, or that he was attacked because of who he is. And that's what scared me. And I know he's a tough guy and he could take care of himself, but you know, just hearing, and it wasn't just the Matthew Shepard story. You heard it so much during that time, because more and more people were trying to come out and be themselves, and you would just hear a lot more terrible stories about how they were brutally attacked, or saying words, or even the picket fences, or the people with the picket sign saying, you know, this is not what God wants you to be. This is, and just I was just scared for him. And he didn't really talk about it too much. I think he was a lot more brave than I was. He just went with it and like, you know what? This is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. But I feel like as a sister, I was just worried for him. Every time he went out, I was worried. But I think what calmed me down was when I saw him hanging out with his friends and just being who he is, and nobody saying anything to him. That's what started to calm me down. And like seeing him going out more, you know, taking me to a gay club, like that was a lot of fun. And it's just experiencing that, it's what calmed me down, because he found a community and friends that were going to be by his side and defend him if anything happened.
Thank you for that, Jessica. Sarah, if you can talk a little bit about the mourning and the grieving that you've had for the imagined life that you had for Nuts. Talk a little bit about that and what that experience was like for you, realizing that this was not, this life that you thought that your child was going to have was not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that is, you know, that's probably the same whether your child comes out you know, with a different sexuality or different gender identity, but it's maybe even a little more intense if your child is gender variant. Because I mean, I do remember that the thing that initially obsessed me, I was absolutely obsessed with the thought that their face was going to change. And I kept picturing the perfect little baby boy that I'd had. And, you know, I had that feeling that, you know, when you first hold your child and they're absolutely perfect, and the thought that they might now change in appearance and also have surgery, or, I mean, that's really scary for a parent. None of those things have happened. And actually, you know, they weren't a little baby when they told me they were already 19, and their face had changed quite a lot since they were born. And it hasn't really changed much in the last 6 years. So, you know, these were sort of unfounded fears, but it, you know, it wasn't just that. I mean, actually, for my child, I mean, part of the reason perhaps why I didn't spot it was that they always had girlfriends. And they continue to have girlfriends, but what I didn't know was that they saw themselves, I mean, I think as female, I mean, now I'm not even sure. When they came out, I understood they were transgender. They would transition from male to female because that's how I understood gender. It's either male or female. And so they would transition from one to the other. And then, I suppose, be seen by the world as a lesbian couple. And I now no longer know whether that is my child's transition journey. And it actually doesn't matter anymore at all because they are just themselves. But in that starting point, that's what I envisaged. And so I had to let go of any images of you know, sort of a straight wedding. I wondered whether this would mean that they wouldn't have any children. But of course, that's irrelevant. I mean, they may or may not have children, and you know, straight children may or may not have children, but that is a very common fear with parents who contact us, and it certainly was one of mine. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be a grandmother. I mean, they weren't planning to have kids at 19 anyway. So, you know, but it's just, but also the fear of how that news was then going to have to be broken out to sort of wider family and to the world. Because, you know, if you're trans, it can be very visible. It can be, you know, not a choice to reveal your gender identity. It may be very, very apparent, although we make judgments about that and assume people's identity and still get that wrong. So that's part of another wider conversation that I needed to understand. But certainly that was a big fear at the beginning. And you spoke a little bit, Jose, about, you know, how you have managed to reflect and think about that it was difficult for your parents when you came out. I had that experience with my parents because with Nutz's permission, I wanted support. So I asked, is it okay if I break the news to my mum and dad, to their grandparents? Because I wanted support from my mum and dad. But this was a bad idea. In contrast to Nutz, who'd broken the news so beautifully and of course had the information to explain, you know, what was going on and what it meant to them. I didn't even have the vocabulary to be able to talk about it properly. Also, I was really, really nervous. I mean, my parents are quite conservative, but, you know, they love their grandchild. I'm sure if Nutz had broken the news to them, it probably would have gone okay. But I did it over the phone. I was nervous. I cried. And because I was upset, they reacted in protection of me. But unfortunately, that meant a reaction against their grandchild. And actually, it's taken years to rebuild that relationship. And I've been so angry about that. About their sort of rejection of their grandchild as I saw it. And my brothers as well said awful things. One brother said they had asked their vicar, their pastor or priest, you know, whatever you name, whether it was still okay to associate with us. And they told me that quite openly. It's like, and the other brother said to me, you know, when we get together at family gatherings, you have to let us know if Nutz is going to come dressed up as a woman because I don't want my children to be frightened. And it's like, okay, your children are not going to be frightened, but you know, you are the one who's got the problem with this. But after a while, I managed to reflect and so I said, yeah, I was scared. And so I have to accept that they were scared and their reactions, you know, the first reaction is not necessarily the best reaction. We need the information, we need the vocabulary, we need to sort of be able to talk about it in a normal way, in an everyday way, and things get better.
You bring up so many things that I want to be able to talk about, and I know we don't have enough time for this. So I do want to make mention, you know, Sarah mentioned, again, gender identity and then sexuality, which we have to look at those things as two separate things, right? You have a trans child who was assigned male at birth and now identifies as female, right? I believe.
Yeah.
who is still attracted to other female or cis women, right? Cis meaning they identify with the sex they were assigned at birth. And I know this can be very confusing for a lot of people who are not familiar with the terminology. So, you know, if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly, or, you know, to anyone within the Pride Circle, Francisco Campos as well. But Sarah, I'm going to continue with you for a second, because we kind of transitioned into this question. What do you wish you would have known? Or, I mean, I think you touched a little bit on what have you have done differently, like what have you have waited to talk to your parents about this transition, but what do you wish you would have known that would have made it a little bit easier, not just on Nuts, but also on yourself, right? And how to deal with what was happening at that present time.
I mean, I wish I just thought maybe even for 5 minutes about gender identity, gender expression, sexuality, you know, and the differences between those. And, you know, that was the information that I needed. That was the information that I got from FFLAG. And I understood then quite quickly, if you just think about these things on a spectrum, that, you know, even just, you know, straight cis people like myself, you know, that I'm still on some sort of spectrum in the way I express myself, you know, in how feminine I want to dress, and my gender expression, and my, you know, so my way of being in that sort of spectrum, and thinking about you know, maleness and femaleness, you know, as a feminist. You know, I've grown up my whole life thinking, yes, you know, I may be a woman, but I can do this. I can be assertive. I don't have to, you know, behave in certain ways that have been seen as traditionally feminine, and so on. So if you start thinking about those separate areas of your life, of your personality, and who you are, and you can sort of find your comfortable place on that spectrum, and you can then sort of appreciate other people on that spectrum too, that people don't necessarily fall into either very masculine or very feminine, but you can be a very feminine man but be straight and be attracted to other women. You know, it doesn't all line up in one line. I think of it like an abacus, and you can switch the beads back and forth all over the place, and that's actually quite interesting to think about in your own way. But I didn't even have the vocabulary, and part of that, to be able to talk about it in a normalized way. And also, although we didn't guess, I mean, when I look back, sometimes I think, yeah, I can see they were opening the door to a conversation and I didn't pick up on that cue. But even if none of our children or family were LGBT in any way, we should have been having those conversations, because it'll be it's part of everyday life. So it'll be their friend, it might be their teacher or a colleague at work, and we want to prepare our children for life in all its richness. So we should have been having those conversations at home anyway. And part of the reason I think we didn't, partly we didn't think it touched our lives, but also in Britain, there was a law in operation sort of in the late 80s and into the 90s called Section 28, which prevented anyone, or schools particularly, local authorities, promoting homosexuality as a pretended way of life. That was how the legislation was expressed. And I believe in America, in certain states now, you know, they don't say gay laws. It's a similar sort of thing. And so therefore, when parents of youngsters who may be coming out these days were at school, it wasn't talked about. It was hidden, and therefore it becomes kind of shameful. And so therefore it's something you do not talk about, and you don't know anything about it, and you don't know how to bring it up. And that's one of the main reasons I volunteer with FFLAG. It's like, we need to be having these conversations in a happy, positive, family way, talking about, you know, families with LGBT members and the great lives that they can have, but just how to talk about it, sharing those experiences. So it's, yeah, I wish we'd talked about it more. it seems easier to do now. There's more and more stuff. You know, you could talk about a singer or a drama that's on TV, or, you know, just don't make a big deal of it, but just sort of make a positive remark about something that's in the news. Or if there is bad news, you know, say, hey, I don't agree with this, and just start that conversation with your children. And then if they do have something to tell you, I mean, I wouldn't, you know, push them, but knowing that you are supportive, that will make it easier when they decide if they have something to share with you and they want to, they'll feel reassured.
Thank you, Sarah. Jessica, I wanted to ask you, you have a very unique opportunity here, right? Because your brother came out to you, and now you have children of your own that are looking towards your brother. So, you know, can you talk to us about, you know, conversations that may be happening at your dinner table, and maybe even your children asking, you know, questions? How do you broach that subject now after experiencing what you experienced with your brother coming out?
Yes, at first I started to look, of course, online just to see what's the best way, because my son's 7 at the moment, but I started talking to him around when he was 4 about, you know, because we were going to go visit my brother, and he lives with his boyfriend. He lives with his boyfriend, so I didn't feel like I had to, like I wanted to explain to him, you know, why his uncle lives with another man, and why he's with his boyfriend. And I guess in terms for him to know what it is, because my husband calls me his boo. So I started out the way he would know what it means. So I would say, you know, Reuben is your uncle's boo. They're together, they live together, and that's okay. And I told him sometimes you're going to meet friends that have 2 moms or 2 dads, or sometimes you're going to see men that want to dress like females, and that's okay that they want to wear a dress or wear heels. Or sometimes you're going to see women that, you know, want to look like a boy, and that's okay, because that's who they want to be, and that makes them happy. And so he loves dress up all the time. Halloween's his favorite. So I told him, you know, like how you like to dress up. I kind of was just trying to make it so that he would understand at his age. And then as he got older, I started to explain more what the words are: gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, because he did see me watch the RuPaul's Drag Race one day, and he said, "Why is that man putting on makeup?" And I said, they're transgender. They love to dress up like women, and a lot of them go and perform. And his first reaction was, "He's so beautiful." And it it's true what they say, it starts at home. So once you start to show a positive way towards everybody else and teach them how to be kind to everyone, and like you mentioned, Sarah, you know, start teaching it at home, start making it to where it's, you know, it's the normal way of life. That's that's the and I'm happy to see that more and more people are able to express themselves now than years before, where they had to hide who they were. And I have a baby girl now, so I'm going to do the same with her and explain to her, you know, what it is and that it's okay. And we also had he's in soccer, and he had a soccer teammate who had 2 moms, and he said, "Look, that my teammate has 2 moms. That's so awesome. He gets to cuddle with 2 different moms at the same time." And so it's just teaching, just knowing how they are, just, you know, in ways so that they can understand it. That's just how I expressed it to him. And as he gets older, I even bought him books so we can read at night. And there are many pride books that you can read to your children when they're at that age. There's even some when they're just small little toddlers as well, just to get them to recognize what the flag means, and what every word means as well.
Thank you for that. I love how you took the time to talk about how you were simplifying the process for him, right? Just to allow him to understand what that means, of course. And as he ages, then we can really break it down and explain that it's not as simple as just, you know, some boys want to wear heels, right? Like it's not as simple as that. But I understand the process of having that sort of conversation with them so they can comprehend what's happening in front of them, right? Um, if you, I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll open up the floor for some questions that are coming through chat. But um, I think, Sarah, you talked a little bit about this when you were having your discussion in regard to nuts, about wanting to open up this conversation, but not pushing them to say something they're not ready to say, right? So how, and this question is to both of you, any one of you can jump in here, but how can we be better allies to our children and encourage our children? You know, Jessica, you just mentioned that you have a little girl now. Congratulations on your little girl. But how now do we encourage them to be able to have this hard conversation about being transgendered or being gay, bisexual, or lesbian, wherever they fall along that beautiful pride flag? How do we encourage them to have that conversation? How do we keep the conversation open in our homes so our children are feel like they can come to us and they can talk to us about what's happening with them?
For my son, I created like a safe space for him. So with anything that he wants to come to me and tell me, he can come to me or his dad. And sometimes I'll tell him, you can whisper it to my ear if you don't want anyone else to hear as well. So, and that's what we do. I know right now in first grade, you know, there's not many tough situations he's going through, except for, you know, one friend doesn't want to play what he wants to play. But as he gets older, I'm creating that trust so that he can come to me if, in case, you know, he does want to tell me something, as if that whether he's gay, bisexual, transgender, or that way he knows that he has that trust with me and his dad.
That's great. And I think Jessica touched on it, you know, that when they are very little, you know, there's so many great books, you know, that you can read, and they may not even be about pride, but just books about difference. I mean, one of my favorites, I'm going to plug it, Red, a crayon story about a crayon that's got the wrong color sort of wrapper on it. So it's a red crayon, but it's got a blue sleeve on, and so doesn't understand why it feels bad. And that, you know, it doesn't, that's not necessarily about being trans, but it's about feeling different to the way the world sees you in a really simple way that can start conversations. And then as they get older, I think it is about commenting on things that are in the news or on the television, or, you know, great books, or just letting your child know without being too intense that this is how you feel, and talking about, I mean, we know from research that a lot of young people will tell their friends at school before they tell their parents. So we need our children to be good allies too, because they may receive the confidence of a friend. And so you want your child to be prepared to be that good ally. And so that might be initially just talking about being a good friend. Like you mentioned that in first grade, it's like, it's difficult when a friend doesn't want to play with you, you know, but building on that, you know, unfortunately, there can be more sort of serious bullying issues that come in. And I think it's important to talk to your own children about how to be a friend, how to step in safely if someone is being bullied or victimized, and encouraging them always to talk about, also modeling the behavior. I mean, we often think with our teens, they don't want to have anything to do with us. You know, they're not interested in us anymore. They're just with their friends. But actually, they're watching you. So model the behavior that you want to see in them, and they will pick up on that.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. I have like 700 more questions, but of course we have to move on. So I just want to open up the floor. If there's anyone that has a comment or a question, please feel free to raise your hand. We can, you can turn on your camera and ask the question, or you can just put it in the chat. If you'd rather not come on camera, we totally understand that. We also want to leave room for any one-off questions. If you guys have anything that you guys may need to just talk to on an individual level, I'm sure if you guys are out in the UK, you can definitely reach out to FFLAG specifically to ask any questions. Here in the States, we have PFLAG, very similar organization that supports, again, family and friends of the LGBT community. And then, of course, we have Jessica within the Pride Circle, the parent circle, who can, maybe help with some questions related to that. So does anyone have any questions? I don't see any hands coming up or anything coming in through the chat. No? All right, there were lots of comments of how moving and thanking you. Oh, Frankie, go for it.
Hey, let me turn. So Sarah, you had mentioned about you breaking the news to your family and kind of how the visceral reaction to that, and it was very negative, right? What did you do after? Like, how do you combat those narratives or those reactions, and what does that look like now?
Yeah, I wasn't very brave after that. I felt that I had really mucked it up and made things worse for my child. So I kind of lay low for a while, although the following Christmas, the brother who had said to me he didn't want his child to be frightened by my child coming dressed up as a woman. His daughter had asked for some books for Christmas from this particular British author, and one of the books that this author had written was The Boy in the Dress. So I bought her that and very much enjoyed watching her unwrap it at Christmas, but I don't think anyone else really noticed apart from me. But it took a long time. I did avoid talking about it, but then as I became more and more active in FFLAG, I would just drop into the family WhatsApp and things like that, pictures of myself at Prides, stuff that I was doing, and then constantly update people on news of NUTS and what they were doing. I do think that my family thought it had gone away, maybe, because the waiting lists for treatment in the UK are so long. So after 6 years, NUTS is now just about to start treatment. But this year we went to Pride in London together and we all walked together. And I posted some pictures of that. And for the first time, my mum came to stay with me for a few days on her own. And she asked me, oh, so this is still, this is still going on, is it? And I'm like, yeah. And she said, oh, that's great. It's so great that NUTS and the girlfriend are still so happy together. And also she said, I don't believe that people are just either just male or just female. I think they're on a spectrum. I was like, what? We've been trying to tell you this for years. So, right. I mean, I think that's extreme, but it takes time. And I think just keep communication, keep the conversation going, focus on the things that, we're still a family, we still love each other and we still do things together. And gradually people just get comfortable with that.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. Everyone's just like what is it, Honey Boo Boo? Everyone's a little gay, right? Everyone's a little gay. There was a comment put earlier that if Jessica and Sarah, if either one of you do have any other resources or books that you can share with us, if you wouldn't mind, Sarah, I mean, we wouldn't ask you to do this now, but if you wouldn't mind emailing us and we can post it and be able to put some resources up if you have any. Definitely. Same with you, Jessica. I think it'll really benefit those parents. I really think this is an amazing conversation to have because we don't have this sort of support for parents and family members that are coming out, right? And not that, not that the LGBTQ community doesn't need the support, but we have to realize that this is an ongoing conversation. And this is, just like you said, Sarah, it's taken years for my parents to come to terms with my sexuality, right? It's not something that happened automatically, and it felt very alone for a while, but now my parents are more involved, right? So my mom and my dad, although me and my dad are still working on a relationship with one another, right? But I think he's more open now to having a real conversation, and he'll ask questions about my dating life and all this other stuff. But it took time to get there. It took time to get there, and I think the most important part is allowing that time and allowing yourselves as parents or family members to feel and to really go through those hard questions. And sometimes we try to hide those questions because we feel like it's not the right thing to say, right? But it has to come out. So I don't think there's any more questions, and I want to be respect everyone's time. So Jessica, Sarah, thank you so much for blessing us with your stories and being honest and being raw and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Scott and Ian, thank you so much, my brothers who helped me put this thing together. And thank you to the whole entire TTC Idea Festival Planning Committee who supported us getting out there. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So again, this was going to be recorded. You guys have access to this a little bit later if you want to. And I'm going to pass it right back on to Ari. Ari, it's all yours.
Thank you. That was it's very powerful on a lot of levels. And I know that there are so many stories out there that we all I'm sure can find in our lives that we can relate to this. In my own life, I have so many. And Jose, to your point, there's so many questions and so many things you want to share. So thank you so much to all of you for being so incredibly brave and sharing that and being so honest about it. That's a very difficult conversation to have when you have to look at yourself and your own actions and how you related to the situation. So thank you.